Well, hello, welcome to another edition of Take 5. It is Thursday, December 22nd, 2011. Thank you so much for joining me today. And we have one of the most important passages in the book of Luke. We are in Luke chapter 9, verse 18. Now it happened that as he was praying alone, the disciples were with him. And he asked them, "Who do the crowds say that I am?" And they answered, "John the Baptist. But others say Elijah, and others that one of the prophets of old has risen." Then he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter answered, "The Christ of God." All right, well, Jesus asks a general question. Saying, we've been hanging around all these crowds. Well, what's their opinion of me? Who do they say I am? We already know Herod was spooked out by the fact that he thought this was John the Baptist come back to life. And apparently that's what a lot of the crowd thought. John had a very large following, but apparently he and Jesus didn't interact very much so people could see them together. So this notion was, and apparently Jesus' following didn't get to a really large size till after John was arrested. So they were just thinking this is John the Baptist come back from the dead. In other words, he's doing the same kinds of things John the Baptist did. Now, they must have thought he had supernatural powers once he came back from the dead, because we don't read, at least, of John doing any miracles. Can't say for sure he didn't, but we just don't read of any. And some of them said Elijah. And Elijah also was a prophet who did miracles in his time, so that would make sense. And Elijah was very forceful and stood against the religious, prideful leaders of his day. So Elijah would fit kind of what Jesus is doing. So sort of they made sense, or they would just say, just pick a prophet, pick any prophet from the old days, and he's come back to life. And you could do that with Jesus nowadays. You could just say he's whoever you want to say he is, if you don't want to face the fact of who he really is. So Jesus makes it more pointed. And this is something we've really got to do, I think, in our preaching. Frankly, I think it's a little bit of cowardice and a little bit of political correctness. We don't, in our preaching, and I'm talking mostly to those of us who teach the Bible publicly, we don't like to point things inward. We don't like to point at our own selves or our own congregation. We'd rather just talk about generalities, about the crowd and about other churches and other people. But Jesus wants us to take things personally. So he says, what about you? That means you, and that means me. You, on an individual basis. What about you? Who do you say I am? And we got good old Peter, and we can count on Peter. One thing you can count on Peter to do is mess up. Stick his foot in his mouth. To just say or do something really dumb. But not this day. And I may tear up because I'm so proud of my boy Peter here. Because I feel he's one of my heroes. I mess up a lot, but every once in a while, guys like me and Peter get it right. And on this particular day, when asked the most important question an individual can ask of himself, who is Jesus? Peter comes through with an A++, bright and shining. He says, "You are the Christ of God." No doubt, no hesitation, no fear, not politically correct. He didn't care. He said, I know who you are. I have no doubt. You are who you claim to be. You are who the prophets prophesied about. You are God's chosen, the Christ of God. The one that everything in the Old Testament pointed to. You're God. Wow. That is big. But you got to come to that same conclusion, friend. And even if you came to that conclusion once, you got to come to that conclusion again and again and again and again, because I'm going to tell you something. There are going to be days where you wonder, is he who he says he is? You know, even John the Baptist questioned, is he who he says he is? And Jesus just said, you go tell him this. The blind see, the deaf hear, the lame walk. Yes, I'm who I say I am. That's what Jesus said. So don't you doubt. Don't you fear. Jesus is still on the throne. He's still the Christ of God. He's still God. And He's still ruling. And He's still reigning. As I said, one of the most important passages in the entire book of Luke, in the entire New Testament. Thank you, Peter, for saying what we all need to say. When you come back tomorrow, it's going to get a little rough. But if you don't understand that Jesus is the Christ of God, you're not going to be able to handle the rough stuff. So get that down pat, and don't even tune in tomorrow unless you got that on straight. But if you do, come back tomorrow for the next edition of Take 5.